Ladies and gentlemen, there is a divine principle in the timing of your life. The hour you rise determines the level you attain. A poor man burdened by lack discovered the secret of 5 a.m. At that hour, the world is quiet, distractions are gone, and heaven's wisdom is closer. He woke early, prayed earnestly, studied relentlessly, and positioned himself for unseen opportunities. Doors began to open, ideas came as if divinely orchestrated, wealth, influence, and favor started manifesting because he aligned his actions with God's timing. Consistency in rising early reprogrammed his mind, sharpened his focus, and strengthened his discipline. He learned that success does not come to the lazy, it comes to those who conquer the morning, capture the vision, and act before others stir. Early rising is not just about hours, it is about destiny. The 5 a.m. discipline turned his poverty into provision, his weakness into wisdom, and his despair into divine strategy. Every minute before sunrise became an investment, a time for clarity, prayer, planning, and preparation. Opportunities that others missed in the noise of distraction became his reality because he had positioned himself in the quiet hours of God's favor. It is in the early hours that breakthroughs are birthed, habits are formed, and spiritual insight is amplified. He realized that mornings are sacred. They are moments to speak to God before the world speaks to you. Moments to think clearly before confusion sets in. Rising at 5 a.m. cultivated patience, persistence, and perseverance. He became deliberate in thought, intentional in action, and relentless in pursuit. The poor man learned that the hour you start your day determines the trajectory of your life. Every success story, every transformation begins in the morning hours. Those who understand the power of 5 a.m. understand the secret to unlocking God-ordained destiny, multiplying resources, and capturing the unseen. The discipline of rising early reshapes character, mindset, and purpose. The quiet hour becomes a time for strategic planning, vision casting, and spiritual communion. Poverty gave way to provision because he honored the morning, invested in self-discipline, and refused to sleep through destiny. The man discovered that mornings are more powerful than any meeting, more profitable than any business, and more sacred than any ritual. Through early rising, he aligned with God's timing, attracted divine connections, and activated supernatural favor. 5 a.m. became a lifestyle, a principle, and a key to unlocking every door that had remained closed. Discipline in waking early rewired his life. Every opportunity, insight, and favor became available because he had mastered the morning hours. The poor man's life transformed because he understood that mornings determine destiny, and destiny belongs to those who wake early, pray earnestly, plan wisely, and act decisively before the world awakes. Rising at 5 a.m. is not just a habit, it is a principle, a spiritual and practical strategy that positions a person to access clarity, wisdom, and opportunities before the world steers. There is something profound about the early hours of the morning that the late hours of the day can never offer. At 5 a.m., the world is quiet. The noise of life has not yet begun, and distractions are minimized. This is a time when your mind can operate without interference, a time when thoughts are clearer and your heart is more receptive to divine insight. For a poor man, this hour became a transformative moment, a point where his destiny began to shift because he learned to rise before circumstances dictated his schedule. The significance of rising early lies in the fact that it allows a person to enter into a rhythm of intentionality. When everyone else is asleep, the early riser has the opportunity to plan, to reflect, and to prepare for the challenges of the day with a level of focus that is impossible when the world is clamoring for attention. At 5 a.m., the mind is not clouded by the residual fatigue of the day or the stress of unresolved problems. It is fresh, alert, and capable of higher levels of creativity and critical thinking. For the man who was poor, rising at this hour allowed him to think beyond immediate survival. He began to see opportunities where others saw obstacles. He was able to make strategic plans, pray with focus, and study with consistency because he had secured a time where interruptions were minimal and the atmosphere was conducive to reflection and insight. The early morning also aligns a person with a natural rhythm that fosters productivity. Human energy follows cycles, and the early hours are naturally suited for tasks that require concentration, discipline, and clarity. By waking at 5 a.m., the man was able to accomplish more in the first few hours of his day than most people accomplish in an entire afternoon or evening. This early advantage created momentum, a sense of control over his life, and a platform from which he could pursue opportunities with intentionality. Wisdom often comes to those who are prepared to receive it, and preparation happens in moments when distractions are minimized. The man who embraced 5 a.m. discovered that insight, creative solutions, and divine guidance were more accessible during these hours. It was during this quiet time that he was able to connect with his purpose, set clear goals, and position himself to take action that would yield results. Rising early also strengthens discipline, which is the backbone of lasting success. When a person chooses to wake up before the world, they are making a conscious decision to prioritize their future over comfort, their vision over temporary ease, and their potential over immediate gratification. This discipline develops resilience, determination, and a mindset that is geared toward achievement. For someone coming from a place of poverty, this is critical because the ability to delay gratification, to act with foresight, and to maintain consistency separates those who remain in cycles of limitation from those who break through to abundance. Moreover, rising at 5 a.m. creates a psychological advantage. It sends a message to the mind and spirit that the person is committed to growth, that they are serious about their goals, and that they are willing to take the extra step that others are unwilling to take. This mindset shift has a compounding effect. It influences decisions, interactions, and opportunities. It attracts like-minded people, favorable circumstances, and sometimes even divine favor. The quiet hour becomes a sacred time for reflection, meditation, and spiritual connection. For the poor man, prayer in the early hours became a source of guidance and encouragement. Planning during this time was strategic and intentional, Learning and study were maximized because there were no distractions competing for attention. Rising at 5 a.m., therefore, is more than waking up early. It is about aligning with a rhythm that enables clarity, wisdom, and the ability to recognize and seize opportunities that are invisible to the distracted mind. Each morning became an investment in his future, a moment to shape his day, influence his decisions, and position himself for breakthroughs that would eventually redefine his life. Early mornings cultivate discipline, persistence, and deliberate action that shape destiny, and these qualities are not accidental. They are the result of conscious decisions made consistently over time. Discipline is the foundation of any meaningful achievement, and rising early is one of the most tangible ways to build it. When a person chooses to wake up at 5 a.m., they are choosing structure over chaos, commitment over comfort, and long-term gain over short-term ease. This choice may seem small at first, but it compounds, creating a momentum that eventually touches every aspect of life. For the poor man, this daily practice of waking early was not just about gaining more hours in a day. It was about training his mind and body to respond to purpose rather than circumstance. Discipline learned in the morning became discipline applied to finances, relationships, and personal growth. Each day he woke before others. He exercised control over his time, refusing to be a passive participant in life. Persistence naturally grows from this discipline. Waking up early is not always easy. There are nights of fatigue, mornings of temptation to stay in bed, and countless excuses that the mind can manufacture to justify delay. Yet, the act of rising despite these obstacles builds resilience. Persistence is not simply continuing with action, it is continuing with action in the face of resistance. By consistently choosing to wake at 5 a.m., the man strengthened his ability to persist through challenges, to endure setbacks, and to continue pursuing his goals even when immediate results were not visible. The rhythm of early mornings teaches a person to trust the process and understand that success is often the sum of small, repeated actions over time. Deliberate action is another fruit of early rising. When a person begins their day intentionally, the choices they make throughout the day become more purposeful. The quiet hours allow for reflection, planning, and prioritization. The poor man learned to map out his day, identify critical tasks, and act with intention rather than reacting to the demands and distractions that arise once the world wakes. Deliberate action is rooted in awareness and foresight. It requires thinking ahead, setting clear goals, and committing to steps that will move a person closer to their desired outcome. Early mornings provide the mental space and energy necessary for this kind of strategic thinking. The habits formed in the morning extend throughout the day. Decisions are sharper, focus is heightened, and energy is channeled toward meaningful pursuits rather than dissipated on trivial matters. For the man who once lived in lack, this shift from reactive to proactive living was transformative. He learned that destiny is not a matter of chance. It is the product of consistent choices guided by discipline, fueled by persistence, and executed through deliberate action. Every time he resisted the comfort of sleep to rise early. He was making a statement about his priorities, signaling to himself and to the universe that he was committed to transformation. The compounding effect of these early morning habits became evident over time. Discipline led to structure in work and study. Persistence carried him through challenges and failures, and deliberate action ensured that each day contributed to the larger vision he held for his life. Opportunities that others missed because they were asleep or unprepared became accessible to him, simply because he had positioned himself ahead of time. The spiritual dimension of early rising also plays a critical role. Time spent in prayer, meditation, or reflection strengthens the mind, clarifies purpose, and reinforces the commitment to action. For the poor man, this spiritual connection provided guidance, reassurance, and insight that informed the deliberate actions he took throughout the day. Discipline, persistence, and deliberate action are interlinked. Discipline trains the mind to prioritize and act consistently. Persistence ensures that action continues even when results are delayed. Deliberate action channels energy toward meaningful outcomes, making each effort count toward the ultimate vision. Rising at 5 a.m. nurtured all three qualities simultaneously, creating a lifestyle in which the man became intentional in every decision, resilient in every challenge, and effective in every action. The discipline of early rising extended beyond the morning hours. It reshaped his character, mindset, and habits. The persistence cultivated in the quiet hours of the morning translated into resilience in business, relationships, and personal growth. The deliberate actions mapped out before the day began ensured that he was consistently moving toward goals rather than drifting aimlessly through life. Early rising became a principle that governed his success, transforming not only his circumstances, but also the way he approached every challenge, opportunity, and responsibility. The man discovered that these qualities, discipline, persistence, and deliberate action, are not innate traits, but skills developed through consistent practice. And the early morning provided the perfect environment to nurture them. The quiet hours are a time for prayer, planning, and preparation that lead to breakthroughs. And understanding the value of this time is crucial for anyone seeking transformation in life. When the world is still and distractions have not yet begun to crowd the mind, a person has the rare opportunity to connect with clarity, purpose, and divine insight. For the man who rose at 5 a.m., these early hours became sacred, a time where he could step away from the noise of life and focus entirely on what mattered most. Prayer during this time was not just ritual, it was intentional communication, a moment to align his thoughts, desires, and actions with wisdom beyond himself. In the stillness of the morning, his mind was more receptive to solutions, ideas, and guidance that might have been obscured during the chaos of the day. Planning in these hours allowed him to take stock of his goals, assess his resources, and strategize in a deliberate manner. Whereas most people wait until the day is in full swing, reacting to circumstances as they arise, he had the advantage of foresight. He could prioritize critical tasks, set clear objectives, and anticipate potential obstacles before they became overwhelming. The discipline of planning early in the day ensured that he remained intentional, that his actions were aligned with his vision, and that every decision moved him closer to the destiny he sought. Preparation during these hours went beyond mental and spiritual readiness. It extended to practical readiness as well. He used the early morning to gather resources, study, learn new skills, and position himself to act decisively once the day began. This preparation transformed ordinary days into extraordinary opportunities. By the time others were waking, he had already laid the foundation for progress, creating momentum that carried him forward. The quiet hours also foster a heightened sense of focus. Without the interruptions of calls, emails, and the demands of others, his concentration sharpened, allowing him to engage deeply with complex problems, think critically about solutions, and generate innovative ideas. This level of focus is rare in a world full of constant distraction, and it became a competitive advantage that set him apart from those who slept through the early hours of possibility. Prayer in the morning was intertwined with planning and preparation. It provided guidance and reassurance, a way to seek alignment with wisdom greater than human understanding. The poor man learned that breakthroughs often come not from frantic effort or luck, but from moments of deliberate seeking, reflection, and attunement to insight. Early morning prayer became the source of clarity, helping him to discern opportunities, avoid pitfalls, and act with confidence. Planning without prayer could be mechanical, lacking direction, but combined with spiritual insight, his plans became purposeful, strategic, and resilient. Preparation without planning or prayer could be random and inefficient, but when all three were integrated in the quiet hours, they produced consistent, tangible results. Breakthroughs are rarely accidental. They are the product of intentional alignment of mind, spirit, and action. The man who embraced 5 a.m. understood that success is cultivated long before visible results appear. The quiet hours became a laboratory for growth, a sanctuary for vision, and a training ground for persistence. In these hours, he could analyze mistakes from the past, refine strategies, and fortify himself mentally and spiritually for the challenges ahead. Planning and preparation in solitude allowed him to think expansively, to imagine possibilities that others dismissed, and to create pathways that were previously unseen. Each morning, he invested in himself, understanding that the quality of the early hours would determine the outcomes of the entire day. Over time, these small, consistent investments compounded into significant advantages. The quiet hours built habits of discipline, resilience, and foresight. They strengthened his character, sharpened his mind, and deepened his understanding of cause and effect. Every breakthrough he experienced was a result of the intentional work done in solitude before the world awoke, demonstrating that the seeds of success are planted long before the fruit appears. The man discovered that the early hours are a multiplier, a time when spiritual, mental, and practical efforts are amplified. What is done in these hours sets the tone for the entire day, creating a rhythm of intentionality, focus, and momentum that propels a person toward destiny. By committing to prayer, planning, and preparation, he positioned himself to seize opportunities, overcome challenges, and experience breakthroughs that would have remained inaccessible to those who slept through the morning. The quiet hours are a sacred investment, a time to cultivate insight, structure, and readiness that directly translate into transformative results. Consistent early rising transforms poverty, weakness, and despair into provision, strength, and favor. And this transformation is not merely external. It begins in the mind, spirit, and habits of the individual. The act of waking early signals a commitment to change, a refusal to be limited by circumstances, and a determination to take control of one's life. For a man living in poverty, the decision to rise at 5 a.m. was more than a routine. It was a deliberate declaration that he would no longer allow lack, fear, or limitation to dictate the terms of his life. Poverty is often a reflection of missed opportunities, delayed action, and reactive living. By choosing to wake early, he began to create a structure in his life that allowed him to anticipate opportunities, act with foresight, and invest time in activities that would yield long-term gain. Early rising enabled him to replace habits of passivity and procrastination with habits of discipline, focus, and productivity. Weakness, whether physical, mental, or spiritual, is often compounded by inactivity and indecision. When the man embraced the 5 a.m. principle, he was forcing himself out of comfort and into action. He strengthened his body through regular routines, his mind through study and reflection, and his spirit through prayer and meditation. Each morning became a training ground where weakness was systematically replaced with resilience, knowledge, and confidence. Despair, which thrives in darkness, confusion, and stagnation, loses its grip when a person positions themselves in the light of early action. Rising before the world stirs allows for mental clarity, spiritual alignment, and emotional stability. The quiet hours give space to reflect on challenges, envision solutions, and recalibrate one's mindset. For the poor man, these moments of solitude became a source of hope, inspiration, and renewed determination. Provision manifests when preparation meets opportunity. The man discovered that by rising early, he was positioning himself to recognize opportunities that others overlooked. He could engage in productive work, acquire knowledge, and take decisive steps toward financial, social, and spiritual growth. Early rising allowed him to convert time into tangible results, transforming scarcity into abundance. Strength is developed in the morning because rising early requires discipline, self-control, and persistence. It is easy to sleep in, to follow the rhythm of the crowd, and to allow circumstances to dictate behavior. Choosing to rise early is an exercise in willpower and intentionality. This consistent exercise strengthens character, sharpens decision making, and builds the stamina necessary to navigate life's challenges. The man learned that strength is not merely physical, it is the ability to persist through adversity, to remain focused under pressure, and to act decisively in moments of uncertainty. Favor often accompanies those who prepare, act, and position themselves advantageously. By rising early, the man aligned himself with opportunities, people, and circumstances that accelerated his progress. Consistency in early rising created a pattern of preparedness, diligence, and intentionality that attracted support, mentorship, and divine guidance. Favor is drawn to those who demonstrate seriousness, discipline, and commitment to their purpose. Transformation through early rising is cumulative. Each day, the man compounded small victories, moments of clarity, disciplined actions, spiritual insights, and productive work. These small wins accumulated, gradually reshaping his life from one of limitation to one of provision, from weakness to strength, and from despair to hope. He realized that consistent early action is more powerful than occasional bursts of effort because it builds momentum, reinforces habits, and establishes a rhythm that sustains progress over time. The discipline of early rising also influences mindset. By taking control of his mornings, the man began to take control of his thoughts, emotions, and reactions throughout the day. He developed a proactive mindset, a belief in his ability to influence outcomes, and an expectation that efforts invested consistently would yield results. His daily routine became a framework within which provision, strength, and favor could manifest. Over time, this consistent commitment reshaped not only his circumstances, but also his identity. He no longer saw himself as someone defined by poverty, weakness, or despair. Instead, he viewed himself as a person capable of strategic action, disciplined effort, and deliberate growth. The morning hours became sacred, a time to plan, reflect, and act with purpose, allowing him to convert potential into tangible results. Every early morning became an opportunity to invest in his future, to strengthen his abilities, and to align with forces that facilitated success. He learned that transformation is not accidental. It is the product of consistent, intentional choices, and rising early is a key lever in that process. Through this discipline, he discovered that life could change, that provision was attainable, that weakness could be overcome, and that favor could be attracted through consistent, purposeful action, demonstrating that mornings hold the key to reshaping destiny.